Greetings and welcome to Indian Minds in Finland, the YouTube channel that highlights the vibrant Indian community that resides, works, and flourishes in the land of thousand lakes. I'm Karthik Sindhya, your host, and I'm thrilled to share with you inspiring stories, heartfelt journeys, and contributions made by Indians to Finnish society and economy. Without further delay, let's dwell into the fusion of Indian and Finnish cultures and celebrate this diversity. Welcome, Parneet, to this YouTube channel. Maybe we can get started with your background and where do you come from?
Thank you so much for the invitation, Karthik. Yeah, when you come to a brand new country, one of the most important things is to keep your learning mode on, and you learn some things new every single day. And that's regardless of the number of years you've been in a specific country. And we are learning it on a daily basis, how the processes work, how the structures are in place in Finland. And a lot of that information actually comes from people like you that I'm interacting with. uh, you've been here longer, so the knowledge bank is obviously greater. So I think it's a great idea to create a repository of all of this information, which newer immigrants can actually make use of, because it just accelerates their learning experience. We had to ask 10 people. You have all the answers right here. So I think it's a fabulous initiative, and I'm glad that I'm able to contribute with my little 2 cents that I've garnered over the years in Finland. So, a little bit about myself. Uh, I carry about 21 years of professional experience working in the aviation and the shipping industry. Before coming to Finland, I was working in Qatar. I was managing the compliance training portfolio for Qatar Airways in Doha. Aviation, shipping are super regulated industries. Lots of audits happening every now and then from different watchdog agencies, governmental agencies. So my job at Qatar was to make sure that when an audit happens, we're standing there with all the required paperwork to showcase that Qatar is ready when it comes to training of its staff. Pre-Qatar, I was working in the UK. I was working for a shipping company called Cunard Line. I was managing the training and development pipeline for cruise ships that these people owned. Now they had two different brands, P&O and Cunard, and I was basically responsible for making sure that everyone on the vessel were trained when it comes to compliance and are generally in good order for safety and service sector training program. So 4.5 years in the UK before coming to Qatar and then Finland. And before the UK, I was working in the US, another shipping company called Celebrity. I was managing the training pipeline out there as well. Again, making sure that people were trained and in good order. So technically, Finland is country number 4 in the last 12 years. But Finland's a little different because the previous countries, US, I was a single man, UK, still single, Qatar, halfway through, I got married, and Finland, I come here as a father and to two boys. So, in that sense of the word, this is a more responsible way of living with family and everyone else, which wasn't the case in the past. When you were a spinster, you could do things your way, but things obviously change once you have kids. Before the US chapter, I was running my own training consulting company in India from 2008 to 2011. And we were basically working on bespoke training programs for multiple industries. So it wasn't really limited to aviation or shipping. Creating programs, pharmaceuticals on 1 month. The next month, you were creating training programs for the IT industry, and then you were working in engineering colleges. So that was 2008 to 2011, and before that, I used to be a training consultant. So yeah, 21 years of corporate journey, most of it in the training business, and that's where my startup also comes into play. So I am CEO of two companies out here: Mandatory Trainings OY, based in Finland, and Signal OY. Mandatory Trainings is in the business of creating compliance based training programs for the aviation and the maritime industry. We basically created a technology stack that has the ability to connect an existing company's HR management system database, and then it can predict who needs to be trained, by when, by what time, before an audit happens, because that's basically a pain area for a lot of companies all around the world. And we create training content so that people are trained well in time ahead, and the company is always compliant. So that is my startup number one. My second company is called Signal OY. That's SI6NAL OY. Uh, what are we doing in this one? Well, we all use Google Maps, right? I'm building a similar application to Google Maps, not for roads, but for rivers. So the app basically has the ability to track the base of the river. In India, Indonesia, Bangladesh, Somalia, the base of the river constantly changes owing to the hydrographic value of the rivers out there. So this mobile application will basically be able to show you what's ahead of you, which is normal, but it will also show you in real time what's under the water as we visualize the base of the river. And we can create a safety line that captains and barge operators around the world can follow to safely navigate big cargo loads. uh, the impact is saving a lot of carbon dioxide, because when you compare a barge to a 22-ton truck, which is generally used in Indonesia, Bangladesh anyway for last mile delivery, a river barge is actually 85% more fuel efficient, which means 85% less CO2 in the environment. This is a space tech company, so we're basically working with, or we're trying to get European Space Agency's business incubation in order to run this up. And yeah, lots of use of satellites. We're actually thinking of building our own satellite and launching it. I think that will be a first for an Indian company in Finland to do that, so that'll be really cool. So that's pretty much what I've done so far in my career and what I'm doing in Finland. I have a very small family. My wife is a medical doctor and a master's in public health from Brown University. She's done a couple of projects for uh, Kenya Public Health Agency, for the Russian Public Health Agency, and for Kazakhstan Public Health Agency. She is a practicing endocrinologist. So diabetes is something that she excels in, and she's practiced for a solid 10 years. We have two boys. Our elder one is 16 months old. He might be running in the middle of this call as well, so you might get to see him if he wakes up. The younger one is 4 months old. We had him in Finland, in Helsinki, and that was an experience in itself, because the elder one was born in New Delhi, which is where we are from. And we are able to compare the healthcare system that you have in this part of the world versus what we experienced with our first child. So that's pretty much my background.
So you said you have two companies now, mandatory trainings and signal, or what is
Yeah,
signal
it's
limited.
signal. We couldn't get a G, so we turned the six around,
Yeah,
and
that's what it was. Yeah. But if I just want to go back to your motivation, so what? So you had a nice career in training, spanning different continents. But what was the moment that you started to wonder that I need to have my own business and I need to create something? So we just want to understand the spark.
this is an interesting question that you ask, and there are many layers of complexity to answer that. But I'll try and share my story in a very straightforward manner. So, working with Qatar Airways, I had 400 trainers reporting to me, dotted line, not direct, not dotted line reporting, because compliance is basically across the entire company. And Qatar had 9 different subsidiaries that we were working with. So, about 400 odd trainers, dotted line reporting from all of these subsidiaries. And Qatar is amongst the more better known airlines in the world. They're big, they pump in a lot of money to run their operations. But we noticed that compliance audits were a bloodbath. It wasn't easy. I used to have a 120-meter square filing room where files were stacked from the base of the filing room all the way 8 feet or 9 feet to the top. And you had training records of about 40,000 employees all stacked up there. And I would spend 3 days ahead of every audit collecting every paper in order. Now, why is the paper needed? So I'll just give you a quick brief for it, and that will answer the question why the startup and what was the motivation. Uh, in an aviation company like Qatar, which has about 40,000 employees, an average employee needs to do about 6 to 8 different training programs, mandatory compliance each year. And these programs basically need to be presented to an auditor when he shows up asking questions. If you do a simple maths, 300, 40,000 employees multiplied by 8 training programs on the higher end, that's a total of 320,000 different training combinations or or complications that we're playing with. So 320,000, that's the size that we had to deal with. uh, and for every training you need to show what content was used, when was the training done, was the guy who appeared for the training, did he actually pass the exam? So these are basic documents that you have to show. Now when you say for an audit you're looking at the entire organization's base, imagine that kind of paperwork. So that wasn't very straightforward, and the system was very reactive, wherein 3 days before the audit, when you pull out reports, you realize that 10% of the organization is not trained. So then for the next 3 days, you're just going right, left, and center training people. So it wasn't a very efficient way of doing it. We saw that as a challenge. So then we decided, well, this needs to be fixed. I went to the upper management with a proposal and I said, well, there's an investment of 2.6 million euros, and we'll be able to just, turn all of this into an online digital solution, and we'll get rid of all the paperwork. But then the justification that we gave probably wasn't strong enough. So they never really let go of that 2.6 mil. And then COVID hit. So when COVID hit, uh, their commercial aviation revenues obviously stopped. All the planes were parked. Only cargo was the area that was making money. Commercial was completely down and out. So their reflex was, let's start firing people. So 40% of my dotted line reporting team was fired. So what used to be earlier a team of 400 now was a team of 240. Now we couldn't complete our numbers with 400. There was no way we could do it with 240. So the writing was clear on the wall that eventually the pink slip will come my way as well. So that was the trigger. And then we said, okay, so instead of we getting into a place where we get fired, let's just build a solution around it. And that's when we decided to start mandatory trainings. So now the question was where to start it from. Qatar was where I was living. I was in Doha, so Qatar made perfect sense. But the problem with Qatar was at that point in time, and I'm talking 2019, 2020, around that time, around the COVID times, the structure was such that you had to have a Qatari partner who owned 51% of the business. And that didn't make sense. You don't really create a company and a solution, make all your investments with time, money, and all the risks, and then you give 51% to someone else. So Qatar was out. That wasn't an option. So then Canada was an option, New Zealand was an option. And my wife's batchmate from her MBBS days in Manipal, he was practicing in Helsinki. So she had a word with him, and he suggested, or he threw the name of Finland up. Now, I'd traveled to Helsinki when I was working with my shipping company. I think I used to travel 4 or 5 times a year to Helsinki. So I knew the place. I'd lived maybe 24 hours or 48 hours in Helsinki at a stretch, wined and dined. So I knew that it was good, it was decent, but then it wasn't really ever from the perspective of settling down in this country. So obviously, we had New Zealand, we had Canada, and we had Finland. Geographically, for us to work within the aviation and the shipping industry, it makes sense to be around Europe or Middle East, because that's where the real magic is. Unless you go to the US, but then that's a different trajectory altogether. So we said, okay, you know what, let's just try Finland. So we built up an entire business plan, and we spent about 2 months just working on the business plan, and we applied to Business Finland. To our shock, we applied on the 5th of April 2021 for the Business Finland's eligibility statement, which is the main document that you need in order to apply as a startup entrepreneur, at around 4 o'clock India time, which I presume should be 1:30 Finland time, right? And 3 hours later, we had a positive response. We were approved. Shocking. What the hell? How the hell does that work? We were expecting at least 6 months of wait. So we applied, and bang, 3 hours later, there's an email back from them. So I looked at the email and I was like, it says a decision has arrived. So I'm like, Manjot, maybe they've rejected us. That's my wife's name, Manjot. And she goes, why do you say that? I said, well, in 3 hours, you generally get rejected, right? We opened it and it says you've been granted the permit. I'm like, oh, that's fabulous. So now the next thing was, how do you apply for a residency? Uh, you go to Enter Finland, you put your details and just upload the eligibility statement along with your finances, and that was pretty much what was needed. We had all of that ready by default. We just came back from Qatar. Qatar was tax free, so 4 years of salary completely saved in the account. So we were sorted on that front. But India did not have the embassy opened for fingerprinting and biometrics. So then we had to wait a solid 3 months before we could actually go to the embassy and do the fingerprinting.
Okay.
and Manjot was 6 months pregnant at that point in time. So by the time we reached the stage of fingerprinting and biometrics, she was 9 months pregnant. And the same thing happened. 5th of July, we got the opportunity to do our fingerprinting biometrics, which basically means proving your identity at a Finnish mission. We proved the identity on the 5th. 6th morning, I wake up and we're done. We received the residence permit. 3 days later, the cards arrive at our house. Now, I understand that's not the case with everyone, and we were super lucky how it just rolled out and just went bam, bam, bam. But that was where Finland kind of made sense to us, and I'm like, dude, things are going so fast. This must be serendipity, and I'm a big believer of serendipity. The stars are lined up, and the things
Yeah.
happen. So then, at the end of July last week, 29th July, we became parents for the first time, and we had our firstborn child. His name is Akam. He was born, and I think on the 23rd of August, I flew out. And the idea was, let me go set the base, get the company up and running, get a house, get the office, get a car, because with the baby it would be a problem and all of that. So then that took me about a couple of months. Meanwhile, my wife was busy applying for the baby's passport. I was away in Finland, so it was a challenge in receiving a passport under the emergency Tatkal scheme. So she had to wait a solid 1.5 months. All in all, by December, we had our paperwork sorted to apply. We then did the fingerprinting and biometrics, and I think it took about a month and a half before our baby also received his residence permit. So February, my wife was here. It was a 6 month separation from each other, but then from Finland's perspective, it was about a month and a half that it took for these people to process everything and bring it up. That was pretty much it, and family life actually began. But in those 6 months, we were able to jump into multiple accelerator programs which were offered by the city of Helsinki uh, for mandatory trainings. So that growth story started. And then a couple of months later, we ended up achieving funding from Business Finland for an internationalization project. So then mandatory actually went to a separate country in Kenya. We did a pilot out there. So all of that happened. So that was pretty much our story in a nutshell.
Yeah. So I think somehow it seems that everything was perfect, and you were applying at the right time, and things progress quite fast. But I think it's not that far from reality. Of course, I think different residence permits probably have different waiting times sometimes, but I can imagine that there things could be processed quite fast. So, but are you the sole owner, or do you have partners in this company?
I just had my baby wake up, so you might hear a couple of sounds. This company basically has three directors. That includes me, my wife, and another local partner that we have here in Finland. That's the same structure for the second company as well. We have the lion's share of the company, and a very small minority share is to the local partner that we have.
Okay. So did you meet your local partner after you came here, or was it some you had you had an idea already before you came to Finland?
Oh, no. In companies, Karthik, it's very important that you know the person that you're actually getting on board, because it's not easy to add people and remove people, especially when you're running companies that receive public fundings. So we came here, we met tons of people, and then we assessed, do we need to get someone who can open new doors for us? Once we found that suitable partner, then the next stage of assessment was, is this person going to be that guy who's who will help us accelerate and would not become a challenge. So, and plus there's a little degree of faith you need to place in whatever you do. We just took the leap of faith and then added on. So two Indians with a Finnish, with the Indians having the lion's share and the Finnish having a small minority stake in it. So that's pretty much our story.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. I had a company some years back too, so I would say that I would this would not have worked out for me if I wouldn't have a Finnish. person in with whom I started the company. I think it actually helped us to kind of understand the basics of the market right well, and also the communication and the paperwork becomes much easier. So it's
So,
because sometimes some of the things are still in Finnish, and it's much easier. Of course, I had a technical consulting company, so we were both contributing technically and also the other way. But I think it was a I think it's a smart move to have Finnish
I
part
think, so
part
I
of
say this: Finland is not a country; it's a club. You can enter the club, but you need someone to open the door for you.
indeed.
And then once you're in the club, then it's not India. It's a very very small, very small circle that you have out here. So as you enter as an outsider, the spotlight is on you. uh, in fact, it's a more microscopic spotlight, and this is just my personal opinion, maybe wrong and maybe different for other people, but that spotlight is very microscopic in its nature. So any and every action that you do is looked at critically, but then it also is looked at with the view that they're wanting to trust you. So you need to uphold that trust. And once you're actually a part of that club, then life is a lot more simpler. And that's what my view is. So we needed a gatekeeper, man, and we said, you know what, let's just go ahead and get the gatekeeper. But the gatekeeper should not shut the door later on. That was the only leap of faith that we had to take. And so far, we've been lucky. Life has been progressing well. We've been doing well.
How dynamic is the software this startup culture in Finland,
Finland has
especially?
been very kind. Things
Indeed.
have worked out, and